Hey, welcome back to another episode of Stories from the Dirt. Today we got a little one-on-one with Shelby Hall. Hi, Shelby.
Hi.
So, Shelby wears many hats in the off-road industry, and today we just want to dig into that and just see how it all worked out for her, see what she's involved in, and see what advice she has for us. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, you've got that right. I feel like I do wear a lot of hats. I grew up in off-road. Some people say I bleed dirt. But it all started because of my grandpa. He's the one who caused all of this off-road mayhem. Um, but his name was Rod Hall, and he was really like a pioneer in off-road motorsports in general. He got into it before off-road racing was a big thing. He helped create it to become the thing that it is today. So, I grew up, I think as soon as my parents felt that I was big enough. So I don't know, maybe like 6 months old. I was in a car seat down in Baja with my family. And so, of course, my grandfather was an entrepreneur. He not only was an off-road racer, but he also had off-road businesses. So from, owning shops where they built all their race trucks to hosting off-road events and tours, as well as tire seminars. So he had his hand in a lot of different off-road related work endeavors. And my dad and my uncle followed suit, and they continue to be off-road racing, and of course they're involved in off-road also. So I did too. I was just always hanging out with my dad and my mom, and when my parents were married, my mom was working in the shop. She was part of the family business, and I do have siblings. My siblings did not latch on to the off-road world like I did. And the thing for me is just I felt so free off-roading. I felt so free, not just driving off-road, but being out in the wilderness, just kind of being out in the elements and having to problem solve, and always an adventure. And I think that's really what drew me towards it. And for a few years, in between racing with my grandfather and kind of after my grandfather got sick, and he started putting down the racing aspect, putting down the business aspect, I sort of felt like I didn't know what I was going to do with my life. What was I going to do when I grew up? I thought I was going to have my grandpa forever.
Right, yeah.
And that was when, so I had started racing as a hired driver at that time. So I was racing for other people's race teams. And in 2019 was when I got a phone call from Ford. And there's a lot of layers to it. We can get into it later, but basically in 2019, Ford asked if I would be interested in driving for them on their Baja 1000 race team. So of course I was like, hell yes, yes I will. I don't care what I have planned. I am doing that.
Yeah.
And man, it's been a whirlwind since then. And so I not only competed multiple years in the Baja 1000 with the Ford racing program, I brought the Rebelle Rally platform to Ford, and we've been competing in the Rebelle Rally since 2020. Mm-hmm. And in 2021, I launched my business, Shelby Hall Off-Road. And that's where a lot of hats are worn. We offer workshops and kind of like top tier off-road events. And now I have my own race program. So there's a lot, and it's awesome. It's everything I've always dreamed of.
Amazing. Yeah, it sounds amazing. So I've yet to make it out to one of your Shelby Hall off-road events, sadly. California is a hard place for me to get to sometimes. But so you said it's top tier off-road experiences?
Yeah, they are. And I mean, what I mean by that is I really try to create it like a one-stop shop.
Okay.
I think about when I'm going to go off-roading for the weekend or for the day. Like typically if I'm going to go out, I kind of want it to be a multi-day thing. It's a lot of work to get your truck together, to get out to the desert, to be out there for 2 hours and then turn around and have to just drive home.
Yes.
Um, so what I like to put together are overnight trips. And, I do the whole planning from the route planning to figuring out where we're going to have our, epic lunch spots. And then there's always something fun that we do when we get to our location. Whether it's whitewater rafting or it's kind of like old school, we're going to summer camp type camping. We like to incorporate something special beyond just the off-road aspect.
Nice. Well, it's on my list, so one of these days I'll get there. I'm sorry I haven't made it yet, but, like I said, that is definitely on my list.
That's all right. I've really been hosting events for the last 2 years. 2024 is my second year, and we're still figuring it out too. It's
Oh,
like I'm my goal is to do 4 events a year between, and that doesn't sound like that much, but it is. It's a lot of work to put together, and between competing and training and racing. So don't worry, we have lots more coming up.
ex excellent, excellent. So when you said you're the only sibling that sort of took hold of the off-roading, when did you know that, like, this was your dream and your goal?
Well, so I started racing in 2012,
Okay.
and from 2012 to 2019 is when I raced with my family's race team. So really primarily with my grandpa.
Okay.
And I worked in the business with him. I mean, he was really my mentor on a lot of facets of what I do today.
Mhm.
And during that time, I just never thought my grandpa would die. I mean, to be honest, I never thought he would age. I didn't think, I thought he was going to be what he was forever more, I guess.
Sure.
I just didn't think that far down the line. And um, there did come a time in, I don't know, it was maybe like 2015 when I thought to myself, oh God, this off-roading thing is so much fun. I worked for the Off-Road Motorsports Hall of Fame at the time. And, but it was all like, basically it was a 1099 employee for everything. So, I don't get insurance. I don't get 401k. Like you don't get the benefits of working a corporate job.
Right. Yeah.
And I kind of got this like hit that I needed to be working a different job. I needed to be working this like regular job where I got all these benefits
Normal.
and
Yeah. Time to be
the
normal, right?
normal
Mhm.
thing. Yes. And that what I was doing, there was no way that that could give me a life because I was adventuring and having to, I was basically an entrepreneur working within a nonprofit organization and having to bring that organization up from a very small entity.
Yeah.
And so I quit at the Hall of Fame and I went and got a normal job and I was working like an administrative role for an eye doctor.
Okay.
And I thought it was what I was supposed to do. I thought, having this like a regular paycheck knowing your work schedule, having weekends off. Like, I thought that routine was what I was supposed to do. And it was like my living hell. I was like a bird trapped in a cage.
Mm.
I couldn't go race the Baja 1000 because I couldn't get that much time off of work. So I missed, really big life moments due to it. And I hated it. Like, it's just, I had no interest in healthcare.
Yeah.
Or, whatever I was doing, working front desk. And so I made it probably, I think it was about 9 months working at this job. And then I went to a race. I went to the Mid 400 with my grandpa. And I kind of like pulled him aside and I said, I really made a mistake leaving the Hall of Fame. Like, I felt like this is what I needed to do, but it really sucks and it is not for me. And he laughed and laughed and he said, you made it longer than I thought you would. And you're just in luck because I am starting this other business and we could really use some like marketing help. And that's where we see you. And so thankfully 9 months later, I was, back into the off-road world. And that was really when I knew that that's where I fit in. That was where I felt joy. That was where I didn't hate waking up every day to go to a job that I didn't want to go to.
Yeah.
And that was really how I knew that that's where I was supposed to be and really where my passion lies. And as the years have gone by since 2015, it's just every day it proves it to me more and more that I love waking up every day, taking on these new challenges and doing what I do to enable me to spend my life off-road.
Yeah. So I was recently at an event with Emily Miller and she told us a statistic about your grandfather and he won, was it 24 out of 50 Baja 100s or 1000s?
25. He won 25
25.
out of 50.
Okay.
I'm 99.9% sure.
Okay. I might have misheard. There was a lot of stuff going on, but it was a very high percentage, around 50. And I was like, wow. And so Emily Miller, as you know, was trained by your grandfather to drive, and she just has nothing but high praise for him. And so I assume you had a very similar training. Did he train you to drive?
He did, yes. Both him and my dad. My dad spent a lot of time with me also fine tuning skills.
Mm-hmm.
But I started learning how to drive when I was, I have this really awesome picture actually that I have next to my bed to remind me every morning of what puts a smile on my face. And I'm probably 6 or 7 sitting on my grandpa's lap driving an H1 Hummer. My family helped, I can't think what the word is. They helped basically make the Humvee, when it was just a military Humvee, make it into a civilian vehicle, which is what you see people driving around town now.
Yeah.
And so that was in the early 90s. And so, yeah, I probably would have been like 6 or 7. And, that was how I learned how to drive, was sitting on my grandpa's lap, driving an H1 Hummer on off-road trips. And, that was like my formal training, was hanging out with grandpa. And when I first started racing, I rode with my grandpa for a few races. And he basically talked his way through what he was doing the whole race.
Oh, nice.
So, if we hit a jump just a little bit too fast, he would be saying that, okay, now we're, approaching this crest. I'm going to let off the throttle just a little bit. Oh, see, we landed that just a little bit too hard. Next time we're going to go 1 mile an hour slower. And that was a huge way that I learned, that I still hear his voice talking like that throughout the race course of really how to be constantly reading terrain and taking that in. And we just had a lot of adventures.
Mm.
All of his businesses were off-road related, and a lot of it was training related for outside companies. And so, putting together all of the trainings, we'd have to run routes over and over and over. And I feel like that was how I don't know if he knew that he was coaching me while he was doing it, but he definitely was. And then as I got a bit older was when I spent time with my dad in side-by-sides, which was really where I learned kind of that higher speed, more precision style driving.
Okay, so that was my next question. Like I know a lot of NASCAR drivers, they get their start in go-karts, or they just like to call them karts. But you went
Yes.
into side-by-sides first?
Yes. I wish I had gone into karting. That would have been like, it just took me a lot longer and I'm still learning. There's still always stuff to learn, and I'm now getting into side by side racing, which is a lot different than full big truck production vehicle
Yeah.
racing. And so, like, I'm still fine tuning all those skills and learning how to go faster and faster. But yeah, my family did not put me into any formal training.
Nice. My dad is 72 and he's been racing shifter carts for, I don't want to say 20 years, but maybe as much as 20 years. And so unfortunately he got into that when I was out of the house, and so he tried to drag me in, but at the time I didn't have enough money to join him. So and I
Totally.
was
I
too old for
know.
him to pay for it anymore. So I kind of missed out on that. But yeah, it looks like a lot of fun. Oh,
It does.
yeah.
I mean, like, we still go out and do go karts. Of course, a lot of my friends are into driving, and anytime any of us are together, there's always an element of competition.
Yeah.
And so not too long ago, we were up in Big Bear, and believe it or not, Big Bear has go karts. So of course, we had to put the competition together, and the boys really wanted to race against each other, and I was kind of they weren't too concerned about me, I think was the deal.
Yeah.
And man, I whooped their ass. One of them did get a faster overall lap time for the week. I did get the second fastest lap time, but I did beat them. Of course, we did a few rounds, and
Yeah.
I did beat them in one round. So I'm getting my kart skills.
Yeah.
I'm honing them.
You're definitely holding your own. Um,
I'm trying to.
so one more question about your grandfather. Um, so obviously Rod Hall is a legend in the off-road industry. Was he legendary to you, or was he just your grandfather? Like, did you know, like the amazing things that he was doing, or was he, you know what I'm saying, like just your grandfather?
For many, many, many years, he was just Papa. And I always knew that he was kind of a big deal. Just one of the things that I noticed with the Hummers, when we would drive around town at the time, like, people didn't really have H1 Hummers. They'd always been these military vehicles. And then you see them cruising around town, people stare.
Yeah.
Just like when you see a Maserati or a Ferrari or something, you look. It's
Right.
loud, it's pretty, it's flashy. And so I noticed that as a little girl. I did notice the attention that my grandfather sort of like had following him. But I never thought too much about it.
Yeah.
And then I started working for the Off-Road Motorsports Hall of Fame in, I don't know, maybe like 2013, maybe, or 2012, maybe it was around the same time actually that I started racing.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, working for the Hall of Fame, I started learning the history of all of the inductees and really learning who these pioneers and these legends were, and why they were a part of the Hall of Fame. And it wasn't until then that I really started like reading and learning all of the statistics that my grandpa had on him, all the things that he had done and accomplished, and that's when I was like, holy shit, man! Like he is a badass. I had no idea. And the thing is he was pretty humble. You
Yeah.
know, he enjoyed the limelight. He enjoyed the praise, but he never tried to find it. He was never seeking it, and he didn't really share that much unless someone asked him.
Mm.
And when he told the stories, it was more of like the adventure that went along with it. It wasn't like, oh, well, I've won 25 out of 50 Baja 1000, eat my dirt. Like it wasn't that.
Yeah.
Um, I think there was a time in his life when he probably had a pretty big head. But thankfully, as he was an older person, when I got to spend the time with him,
Yeah.
he was very humble and really more wanting to share what he had started.
Nice. So then you said in 2022, I believe it was, you brought the Rebel Rally situation to Ford. So I didn't know. Is that the first time Ford entered?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it was in 2020.
Oh,
So
sorry.
we had been racing. Oh, that's okay. We had been racing the Baja 1000 for 2 years, and what they built for the Baja 1000 was a prototype racetrack. So anytime you are racing like a desert race, you've got to have, it's no longer a production vehicle
Mm-hmm.
because you got to make a lot of modifications to it for safety so that it can drive long distances. You know, like a regular old like fuel cell isn't going to be able to take you very far
Right.
in the big scheme of things. You need a roll cage, you need all these kinds of things. So the first year that we raced the Baja 1000 was 2019, and we did not finish.
Okay.
And we DNF'd the race, and that sucked.
Yeah.
That sucked for the team. That was a hard hit for Ford. And we went back in 2020. We learned from the mistakes made before, came back and finished second. So that's part of racing. But one of the things that really stuck out to me, and it was something that my grandfather had taught me, was when you work with a manufacturer, it is your job to make the vehicle work in its element.
Mm.
It's not for you as a driver to show up and say, well, this car can't go as fast as I'm able to drive it, because it's not about you. It's about the manufacturer.
Right.
And so for me, I felt like the Rebel Rally was such an awesome platform for Ford to showcase their production stock vehicles,
Mm-hmm.
because that's exactly what the Rebel Rally is. It's not for these super built, really highly capable machines.
Yeah.
It's for what we drive to the grocery store to pick up our kids, to go on road trips, and still be able to take it to work. That's the point.
Yeah.
So I had no idea how to put a proposal together that you submit to Ford Motor Company. I had no idea. And I was really nervous. And I thought, why would anybody listen to me? But there was this other thing in the back of my head that said, when will you ever have this opportunity to have Ford sitting at your dinner table? This is the only time you've got.
Yeah.
And what's the worst thing they're going to say? No?
Yeah.
And then you're in the same boat?
Yeah.
So I did. I opened up a Word document and I put together the most basic proposal on the planet. It's hilarious to see where my proposal started and where they are today. But and someone read it and believed in me and believed in this event. And they said, this is awesome. Not only do we want to support you in fielding this, we want to put in 3 vehicles.
Oh, nice.
And so that first year, we had 3 Bronco Sports. We couldn't put Bronco in yet because there's like a time. It has to be available to the vehicle itself has to be available to the public within like 3 months or something like
Yeah,
that.
it's something like that.
And so the full size Bronco wasn't going, that didn't fit into that. So we put in 3 Bronco Sports.
Mm.
I hadn't competed since 2016. So I was like, I was learning what the new Rebelle Rally was, because boy, it had changed since
Yeah.
2016. And that was during the pandemic. And my teammate was Penny Dale, and she lives in Canada. So traveling between the United States and Canada was not a thing.
Yeah.
The quarantine time was like 2 weeks or something like that. So being able to train together didn't happen. So Penny and I just like worked together over Zoom to try and put together the program for 3 vehicles, and of course 2 of the other teams were complete rookies. And it was incredible. Like that year was really hard. You know, I am used to full size 4x4 vehicles, and moving into a smaller X Cross type vehicle, that had a huge learning curve for me.
Mm.
You know, teaming up with someone that I barely knew, that had a big learning curve. Trying to show, you know, prove to Ford that this program was worthy. That was a lot of work. And it was so worth it, man. Penny and I got along so well. We had so much fun, and we won that year, and that was really huge for us.
Yeah.
You know, that was awesome for Ford. And we actually were the first people to capture a win in the new gen Bronco. So the whole Bronco lineup, we were the very first team to bring home a first place finish,
Nice.
which was pretty rad, because in other aspects of racing and competition, you know, teams were out competing, and for us to bring that home was really special.
Yeah. So, obviously I have a couple of Rebelle questions for you as well, but let's jump right into this one first. So obviously I'm going into my 3rd year as a Rebelle, and every year I write down a goal and I put it in my binder, and it says win the Rebelle, and then I put the current year, right? And so like I'm like a big dreamer. I'm like a big goal setter. I realize the big goals, you're not always going to get to them, but I feel like if you don't set them, you're never going to work towards them. So I write it down, I put it out there. What does it feel like to cross the finish line and be like, "Oh my god, I'm the winner?"
Well, we didn't know. You know, when you cross the finish line, you don't know your scores,
Well, that's
and you
yeah.
don't know what everybody else's score is. So, you know, you're just like, it's crossing the finish line for me that year that we won, or every other year that I haven't won. It's bittersweet. You know, it's like, you're so glad it's over, because it was a really hard 8 days, but you just want one more day, right?
Yeah.
You're like, we slayed those last checkpoints. Like, I can't wait to get out there and get some more checkpoints. But the year that we won, once we found out that we had won, I mean, it was just like, it was really special. I mean, and for us that year, we kind of did like with the 3 teams, we wanted to have a theme at the gala, and we thought it'd be really fun, of course, to be kind of with like the cowgirl theme.
Mhm.
And so all of us brought some like cowgirl themed outfits for the gala. And my grandpa used to wear Stetson cowboy hats. So I got one out of storage, out of the rafters at my grandma's house, and I bought a cowboy case for it, cowboy hat case, so that it didn't get ruined, because of course we have to take all of our gala clothes on our rally with us. And it was really special to wear his hat that night for the awards. And you know, he passed away before he learned of my relationship with Ford and the blossoming of what was happening.
Mhm.
And it felt, I mean, I wish that was the one thing I really had wished that he'd been able to see that win.
Yeah.
But damn, it felt good. It felt good to succeed, to be able to see all that hard work pay off.
Yeah.
It was kind of a bummer because it was COVID, or it was still the pandemic during that time. So we didn't even get to give a speech or anything.
Oh,
We just got to like take our trophy and like go sit down, and we were kind of bummed about
no.
that.
Oh. Wow, I didn't realize that. I wasn't involved at that time yet. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so that brings me to another question because you're right, and while I know it to be true that you don't know that you've won when you cross the finish line, I guess hearing you say that, I've just now fully realized for the first time, like, you don't cross the finish line. It's not like a running race. They're not like the banner doesn't drop, the confetti doesn't come out like you've won, right? Like you cross the finish line like everybody else. So, how do you learn that you've won?
So, I mean, we typically know, well, of course we know the standings in the morning.
Right?
And that's how you got to enter the day, is with whatever strategy that you think is going to work to win the day.
Right.
And I mean, so you cross the finish line and you are just like, thank God this is over. And the last day is the hardest day in the dunes.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you're just like, thank God we made it here. Thank God. Thank God we're here. And this is the last day.
Yeah.
I mean, usually I'm like feeling like bittersweet tears because, like I said, like I'm so ready for it to be over, and yet I'm so not ready for it to be over.
I always cry, like
And
ugly cry.
yeah, it's so
It
hard. And
is.
you don't feel all that weight until that day, until you cross the finish line and you're like, oh man, this was just the hardest 8 days of my life.
Yeah.
And every year it's like the next hardest 8 days.
Yeah.
So I don't even know how we learn. I'm trying to think last year what we learned our final score was. So I guess I don't even know. I guess we just see our scores later that day.
Okay, so there's no like pomp and circumstance really until the gala.
I mean, that's what I'm thinking.
Okay.
So our partners, like Rory's husband and my boyfriend, are there, and so we get to see them, like after everything,
right.
After we get through the finish line, after all that kind of stuff, we like clean up and they know the scores because the scoring is live. So when we see them, they are able to fill us in with where our standing is at that point.
Right. Okay. Yeah. That makes sense. Okay, so it's a little anticlimactic.
That must be it.
Yeah.
It's very anticlimactic.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. So I need to reframe my expectation here is what I'm learning. This is good. This is good information. Yeah. Wow. Okay, so fitness.
Yeah.
We just did a fitness roundtable in the Rebel series talking about the importance of fitness for the Rebel. Just, general fitness, not talking about a single body size or body shape or any one particular kind of like avenue of fitness. And I know that you've been working on your fitness. So what do you think the importance of fitness is like in the off-roading side of things and then also like how it relates to the Rebel?
It's so important. I mean, we are athletes, as an off-roader for what I do with racing and putting together off-road events. That is athletic. Am I out running marathons? No. But I have to have stamina. I have to have endurance. I have to be able to lift tires if I have to change a tire. I have to be able to stand for long periods of time. I have to be able to hike up stuff. All of that is so important physically, having physical muscles and strength. But then on like the emotional and mental side, fitness and working out, doing hard things over and over, doing things when maybe you don't necessarily feel like doing them, all of that builds you into a stronger person so that you can endure those 10-hour days that we have in the Rebel, having to make decisions for 10 hours straight after sleeping probably pretty shitty in a tent the night before in 14-degree weather. Then we have to pack all that stuff up. Like we're putting our bodies through stress during this time of competition, and being tired, there's no time to be tired. There's no time to, I don't feel like doing that. I mean, you can, that is an option. You just won't be successful score wise, in the rally.
Yeah.
And I love it. I mean, I love exercising. I love pushing myself. There's days when I don't feel like doing it, but I do it anyways because it's what I know I need to do. And I do think so much of the fitness aspect is that endurance and stamina. It is vital. It's everything.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, so you are the primary driver. I think we've made that obvious, but we didn't actually ask. So even as a driver, just sitting in your seat for those 10 hours, just having that stamina is beneficial, I would imagine.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, I drive a lot, so I do have that going for me that I'm kind of like constantly training my brain to be able to focus on driving for long periods of time.
Mm,
But if you don't, and you're just jumping into the rally or your off-roading is really only rally related, your brain gets tired because you're constantly having to make micro decisions every single moment that you are piloting that vehicle. You're having to figure out what speed to go. You're having to figure out where to put your tires. Do I need to air up my tires? Do I need to air down my tires? What landmarks am I looking for? There is just so much just in reading terrain that you are tired at the end of the day.
yeah.
So sitting in the driver's seat is definitely tough. I don't know if it's as tough as the navigator seat, but it's tough.
Yeah, I don't know either. I've never, but I am not a driver, so I think for me, because I don't train to be a driver, driving would be way more fatiguing to me than navigating because I train to be a navigator. Um,
So I'm the opposite. So when I sit in the navigator seat, I'm like, whoo, my brain is tired
yeah.
about halfway through the day or so. But when I'm in the driver's seat, man, I can go 17 hours. Like I can drive for really long periods of time. So training is key.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm working on my goal this year was to be a better driver just in general, and this will be my 3rd year in the rally, and I'm from the East Coast, and so we don't have dunes that you can really drive on the East Coast. So coming out here, the first time I saw Glamis was my first rally, and I was like, okay, these are ginormous. I'm a very I'm probably the most chill passenger or right seat person you've ever met. Like I don't get car sick. You can do almost anything and I remain perfectly calm. Unless I feel like my life is truly in danger and I can count that on one hand. Um, and even then I tend to remain calm. I just am aware that this could be really bad. Um,
Yeah.
and so, my whole point, in my first couple rebels, I was like, if something happens to my driver, I'm capable, I could get us back to base camp if it were on me to get us back to base camp. Not a problem. It's not like I don't drive. I'm just not a quote driver. Um, and so this year I was like, I have a manual Tacoma. I'm like, I'm gonna learn to drive my manual Tacoma in Glamis. And so Nina invited me to her 7-day training, and I went from scared and not competent to competently terrified, I like to say. I mean, I can get where I need to go, and I only cried once. Um, but, and then also I've, like, put in some more concentrated time just, like, behind the wheel on the roads, just kind of pushing myself, like, hearing Emily's voice, her little car talk, "Are you comfortable? Are you accurate? Are you relaxed?" And then so, I practice asking myself that as I'm going, and then I either speed up or slow down, but I really am only good for about an hour. And then I'm like, "Whew, are we done yet?"
Yeah.
It's a lot, like, just
It's a lot.
the stress and the anxiety driving for me is just so much different than being right seat. Um, like, I if as long as you can drive, I can sit in that right seat and navigate or do whatever you need me to do, but you switch with me and, like, I talk out loud to myself and, like, little hype words, or I scream when I go around corners, "Oh my," so it's entertaining. Yeah, it's entertaining.
I mean, 7 days in the dunes is intense. I mean, I've never done 7 days straight in the dunes. So good for you, girl.
I
That's a leap.
I added the time, and it was more than 40 seat hours in the sand.
Wow.
It was insane. I mean, she keeps you out
Yeah.
there, and she keeps like, she tries to stress you out and make you tired and keep you making good decisions. So that was a great training. But yeah, so that was, like I said, that was one of my goals this year, to make myself a better teammate, is to really learn to drive and understand the dunes. And then, of course, I like to do things the most complicated way possible, so I did it in a manual.
I've been in the dunes only once in a manual, and it was I was nervous at first for sure. I was like, oh man, and I wish I'd had one more day, because I did feel like day one I started picking it up, day two, but then I feel like day three would have been good. But it's definitely a whole different experience when you have a manual transmission. That is a whole nother thing you got to think about.
Yeah. I don't, I think it was a good idea. I'm not really sure. I didn't tell Nina I was I did I didn't tell Nina I was bringing the manual until I showed up, and then even then I didn't say anything, and they were talking about something, and I raised my hand, and I was like, "So what do you do if you're in a manual?" And they were like, "What?" I was like, "Oh yeah, my truck is a manual." And they were like, "Okay." So, yeah, they handled it well.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Um so what is your favorite memory from behind the wheel?
My favorite memory. Wow, that's a good question. Honestly, I mean, I don't know if I have a single favorite memory, but honestly, anytime I'm off roading down in Baja, like that's really special times for me. And it's maybe not necessarily racing down in Baja,
Uh-huh.
but like the pre-run. So when we race the Baja 1000, we typically do a pre-run
Mm.
first, and that's where you get to go actually run the race course, so that you can make notes and you can get eyes on it and actually, be there before you're there for the first time, full bore ahead in the race car.
Yeah.
And those trips are always really special. Like they are just so much fun. There isn't the stress and the weight of competition. So you get to really like take in the sights and really be a part of the landscape instead of just maneuvering through it. And 2 years ago, I took a trip down to Baja with like a tour group. It's called Expedition Off Road.
Mm-hmm.
And they've been going down there for, I don't know, 10 years or something. And so they put some really awesome routes together. And the trip I went on was for Broncos only. And I just had such a magical time on that trip. It was my first trip being in Baja for fun and not for a race or like a work related thing. And it was just like full adventure. I mean, we still drove really fast and hard and, which is what I love to do. And,
Sure.
but there was no stress behind it. It was just like me and my truck and my buddy, and we were just going out to have a good time. And it really left a very lasting impression on me.
Yeah, that sounds like a lot of fun. And then in contrast, what's been your worst day?
My worst day. I mean, I've had a few pretty bad days in the rally that just suck. Not from like a driving standpoint, but just like an emotional standpoint. Where I'm like, I don't like the person that I'm becoming. I don't like the decisions that we're making. I don't like the outcome of all of these things put together. But, I probably the worst day behind the wheel was the first time that I tipped the car over.
The first time? Okay.
The first time. I mean, I do want to just make it clear, I've never rolled, knock on wood.
Yeah.
Okay, I've never, and to me, a roll is like a full-on roll.
Agreed.
So I've tipped two cars on their side. So we just went, right, and landed on the side, pulled it back over, and continue onward.
Sure.
So the very first time that happened, it was in Baja, racing the Baja 1000. It was my first time racing the Baja 1000. And we had a very long night. I had the night shift. And I made like every rookie mistake there was to make. It was my first time racing the Baja 1000. I was so nervous.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, my grandparents really threw me to the wolves when I first started racing because we didn't do a lot of like smaller local races to like, learn how to race.
Yeah.
He was like, ride with me once or twice, race one smaller race, and then we're going to Baja.
Nice.
And so I was like really not making probably very great driving decisions, but it's how you learn.
Yeah.
So we'd had a tough night. We'd been stuck in silt for quite a while, so it was like a lot of digging and like using max tracks, and thankfully someone finally showed up to like pull us out. And so it had been a long night. And we were about a mile out of where I was getting out of the racetrack, where my stint was going to be completed.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, thank baby Jesus, we are 1 mile from getting out of this racetrack.
Yeah.
And we were running along the base of hills, those hills on our passenger side, and then kind of like a big long valley on the driver's side. And I was really traumatized by our moment or our time. It was much longer than a moment in silt earlier in the night. And so the road that we were driving on, there was a big silt pocket up ahead. And for some reason, I decided I wanted to drive around the silt pocket. And for some reason, I decided to drive up onto the side of the hill instead of like down low.
Mm.
And just the rear end of the car started coming around, and I didn't know what to do. I'd never been in that predicament before. And so I did nothing. And the car just tipped. It was a Hummer. I was racing an H3 Hummer. Just tipped right over on the driver's side.
Oh, no.
And, I was like, like, what are we going to do? I mean, the first thing that went through my head was, do we have to tell my grandpa? So the good news was we were so close to the pit that we were able to radio to our chase crew, and one of our guys was able to come over and pull us back onto all four wheels. And we were able to carry on and finish the race. But that really sucked in the moment. And when I got home, my dad said, well, what did you do wrong? You know, what could you have done to fix that? And I was like, I have no idea. I have no idea. I don't know, not drive up the hill. And he was like, well, you can still do that, but you need to always have your wheels pointed downhill. That way, you know, gravity will take you downhill with the direction that the tires are going. And so that was my major lesson of always keep your wheels pointed downhill when you're on an uphill slope.
Yeah. How cute.
And I've done it once again since then, but now I feel like, I mean, I'm sure something else will happen similar someday, but now definitely that's always in the forefront of my mind. I tend to learn most things the hard way.
Yeah, same. I mean, and for what you do, flopping, I call that flopping a vehicle it's to be expected at some point along the road, right?
It
I
is.
mean,
It is. I mean, and that was one of the other crew guys. You know, I just wanted to like hide under a rock. I was just like mortified. I was so afraid my grandpa was going to be mad at me. I was so afraid I had ruined our race for everybody. Like, you know, you just think of all the worst things.
Yeah.
And thankfully, one of our other crew guys came up and he said, Shelby, it's not if, it's when. Like, this is part of what we do. Do not think about it for one more second. And he's so right.
Yeah.
It is. Like, we're constantly pushing boundaries and finding limits. And, you know, a lot of times you can't find the limit until you exceed it.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of, it is part of the deal.
Yeah. Found that. Check.
Yeah. Exactly.
So I like to do this fun thing that I call fast money. There's no money involved, but you do have to be fast. I know.
Okay.
So I'm going to ask you 10 questions, and your job is just to answer with kind of that first thing that comes to mind, not really thinking too much about it. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. Usually I start a timer, but my phone is not accessible. Okay.
Okay.
First car that you ever owned that was like yours, you had the keys to it.
A Dodge Neon.
Okay. Rock crawling or desert running?
Desert running.
Oceans or lakes?
Lake.
How many pairs of Vans do you own?
20.
Ooh, good.
15. It's a lot.
Okay. Can you drive a manual?
Yes.
Coffee or tea?
Tea.
Oh, what's the best sandwich?
The best sandwich. I know. I would say my grandma's tuna sandwich.
Nice. Hamburger or sushi?
Hamburger.
How many tattoos do you have?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 and 1 removed.
Okay. And then how many states have you visited?
Oh, I did this just the other day on social media. I would say maybe 10.
Okay. Nice. Good job.
Maybe more. I don't know. Someone on social media actually, because like it was a thing where like all the states were listed and you just like cross out the ones you've been to. Yeah. And I totally missed Tennessee, and someone like DM'd me and was like, I met you in Tennessee. And I was like, oh yeah, I have been there. So yeah, maybe 10 or 15.
Yeah. Nice. So are you and Rory coming back to the Rebelle this year?
We are, absolutely.
Nice.
Last year was our rookie year together, and it was such a blast. She's amazing. She has taught me so much about navigation. We work together so well as a team. And I mean, we're awesome friends. She helps me in my business. Like we're stuck like glue.
Excellent. And so one last question. What advice would you have to a female wanting to enter the motorsport space professionally?
The first thing that I would recommend is to um, you got to be involved. You know, it's easy to want to do something, but you have to actually be involved. And if that means going to the races with me and learning what pits look like, and learning to what you need to make that pit successful. Um, some people will say like working in a shop and sweeping the shop floors. I don't work that much in a shop,
Mhm.
but it's kind of the same thing. It's like you gotta just get involved because so many opportunities are given to those who are there. There are so many opportunities that I've been given just because I showed up and I was there and people started seeing me over and over and over again. Um, so, I mean, saying yes and showing up.
Nice. Excellent. Well, I want to thank you for your time this morning, and I look forward to seeing you on the starting line at the Rebel.
Yes. And maybe we'll be able to get together for a training before the start line.
I hope so. Yes, I hope so.
Well, this is awesome. Thank you so much for having me. This has been really fun.
Thanks, Shelby.